There we go. Well, hello, friends. Welcome to episode 14 of Your Story Within. I'm so excited about this podcast. I have two experts today. We're going to talk about what do companies want. I get that so much, from my clients. I know my guests will say the same, but we'll get into that in a minute. But what do companies want, job seekers? What do they want? Well, we're going to find out today. We have right now Jessica Visek with us. Let me give you a little rundown on her wonderful background. So Jessica is a certified resume writer. She is also a nationally certified LinkedIn strategist. The certification is called NCOPE, I believe. And anyway, that means she's an expert. Let me just say that, all right? She is an owner. She has her small business called Your Resume Partner. She offers, obviously, resume writing and the LinkedIn stuff, but also branding, keyword optimization, achievement-based content. Her goal is always to highlight her clients' value and create a compelling career narrative. And basically, just grab that reader's attention so her folks can get jobs. So she has worked with professionals all over the world and at various stages in their career journey. So what a wonderful opportunity we have with Jessica today. Welcome to the show, Jessica. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
All right. So Jessica, as I told you before the show, I get lots of questions, and I know you do too, from our job seekers. So let's talk about some of those things. So the first question I want to throw out there at you, and let me get rid of some of this technical stuff. All right. So what have you found to be most important to companies when it comes to selecting a candidate? Is it experience? Is it education? Is it potential, or all of the above?
I would say all the above. At times, when I'm advising clients through the job search process, which is the first stage of my overall process, a very holistic process, is really looking at, taking a deep dive at the jobs that they've identified as their targets. Right. And then assessing, okay, what are the haves? What are the things that cannot be moved? I.e. the requirements as relates to the job. And certainly education is a factor. What I've been seeing also, through my experience from this seat, because I was a hiring manager and also worked in HR for many years, is companies are hopefully recognizing that there's talent out there that maybe potentially didn't go to college, but have X number of years of experience, maybe coupling that with times with the military. I've worked with folks, I knew you would appreciate this, is transitioning out of the military. That my God, that level of experience and skills that they've gained through working with the military is invaluable. But it's obviously translating that. So ultimately is figuring out, we're limited, going back to the job description, limited to kind of how the company has framed out the job. But at the end of the day, we can do our best to align them, but I don't want my clients to feel that they're so constrained by that. That's why I, emphasize putting, their value, market value, the relevant market value on their resume and again, grabbing the attention of the reader, and then in turn, bringing that forward to their LinkedIn. I'm sure your other podcast, Tom, might have spoken of the LinkedIn with regards to it being a hidden job market. And, I explain that to my clients because companies are searching talent every day for talent. And if your LinkedIn is subpar, you're going to get missed.
No, all good stuff. And I agree with you. I agree that, going to the military example, you're absolutely right. They may have a role that they've held over the years, but the military always gets a lot of what they call collateral duties, meaning they need someone to take on that task. And a lot of times I'll tell you, I get military clients who say, I don't want to do the role I did. I fell in love with that collateral duty. Can I do that? And sometimes those collateral duties are significant, managing huge projects. When they were an Intel person, I don't want to do Intel. I want to do project management, and
Right.
how to, convey that on a resume, especially when the resume says you have to have this or that required,
Right.
required task. So we talk a lot about preferred and required, and which that's going to be the next question. So let's not go there
Okay,
quite yet.
great.
Not yet.
Okay.
So yes, that, but I'll tell you, I have a PhD in organization and management. My specialization is in IT. I didn't do a lot of IT. My dissertation was on it. I've written on it. I've worked with it, but I have not had it as a full-time job. I was not an IT person. I say all that to say I have a lot of IT clients, though, because I understand the language. And I have discovered that a lot of my IT folks may not have those degrees, but what they do have are those certifications.
Right.
Those very valuable certifications. And again, that goes to, gosh, is it experience? Well, they have all those years of experience. Because back in the day, you didn't have to have those degrees. You didn't have to have the certifications. It was, can you do the job? We need you to do the job.
Right.
And then is it, potential? Absolutely. If they can demonstrate that they've already gotten a certification, which is a very high level industry certification, yeah, the potential's there, but how do you get there? How do you help them on the resume convey that, So all that to say, I agreed with everything you said. So let's talk about that next one when the job posting says required and preferred. What do you tell your clients about those categories when they see them on the resume?
Well, I kind of have to let them down a little bit if some of the required is just there's just such a there's not a maybe level set them a bit. Have a frank conversation with them. That's why, going back to what I said earlier on, the first step in my process of really identifying the right targets, targeted positions, because that really sets the stage. So, educating the clients on what is preferred versus required, how to really review a job description, and understand what the company is really trying to communicate, but also to be frank with them and say, when this job description is written, it's coming from the perspective of, and depending on the size of the organization, how it's structured, it's between the recruiter and the hiring manager, or it's between, it's a collaborative, you hope, you have to factor that in, excuse me, for, ensuring that this job description does represent, what is required of the person to do the job effectively and successfully. The point that I got from a friend who's a recruiter is that, if the recruiter's doing their job, they also need to have a level setting conversation with the hiring manager and tell them, hey, so you're telling me that this is what's required of the job. And you realize that, once we put this out here, that we're restricted to accept candidates that have these requirements. So we have to be sure that we're not limiting our pool, and where it's an accurate portrayal of what the job expectations are and the job scope.
Right. That's a good addition. Getting that feedback from the recruiters. I know you were in that realm, the HR recruiting, and now you do all this other stuff. Just amazing. Yeah, that's where I think the networking also comes in. When you can't apply for something online, job seekers, you should be out there doing your company research beforehand. As Jessica said, that's again where the LinkedIn comes in, really to help you out, because you can find people who work for the company. And a lot of times, if somebody can walk you in the door, perhaps that preferred, that's great, but that required might not really be required. You don't know how However, if it says required, they need an engineer with an engineering degree and you have no engineer, there's going to be times where absolutely it is required. You can't do the job without it.
Right.
And that's a given. But again, that's where networking really comes in. At least that's what I've found when it comes to those required. If it's a basic requirement and that person has 20 years of doing that job, that's when I say, man, make sure you're doing your networking and your company research and reaching out, because you might be able to get in and not have to deal with that requirement. Would you agree, Jessica?
I would. I certainly would. I think networking, and I emphasize this with my clients, is really a key part of the job search process. Certainly, you have to put the resume together. You have to go through the process of applying online, but and that resume goes through job seekers. And sure, you've heard the inevitable ATS, or applicant tracking system.
Yeah.
And that's a requirement. Company needs to have that for various reasons. Legally and obviously from a equal opportunity perspective,
right?
And that's where the keyword factor comes in. But don't just purely depend on that. Don't just keep clicking and sending off. I ask my clients from go, okay, look at your current network. Start to create a targeted company list. And then in turn, once you've identified certain companies, circle back on your network, and then look in turn on what opportunities are within that organization. It's very possible, since that individuals have a good relationship with folks in that organization, and you love their culture, you love their mission, but at this point maybe the company isn't hiring that specific job that maybe you're aspiring to get into. Right. But at least get your name out there too. So don't depend solely on, at that point, the business need, which translates to the job description, the job posting, that's based on a business need. But also, again, work it. I know it's intimidating, networking. I've been there. I've been, on the side of looking for a job.
Me too.
And it's daunting. But once you got the hang of it, and once again, who you are, what your value is, that's why, again, I go back to the key achievement factor, and why I emphasize that with my clients, and translating that on the resume, and also bringing it in the LinkedIn profile. It's because that's the talk track. That's something at your fingertips that you can speak to, and that will start the dialogue and start the conversation. And companies will see this as, an opportunity to recognize maybe something that they need, i.e. a pain point that you have addressed and you have success at.
Right.
And these are successes that you need to be proud of, and that will help your confidence as you move forward in looking for.
I'm glad you brought that up, because here's the thing. We know, based on our conversations with our job seeking clients, that they can get the job if they get that interview. But here's the thing, you got to get the interview, and you're not going to get the interview if you're not networking, potentially, or your resume doesn't give them what they need, because they receive hundreds of resumes. I had a HR person once tell me, if I read one more resume that says I manage or lead something, she was just going to throw them all up in the air, because she said, I need something more. Give me your results. What are the outcomes?
Yep.
Okay, you manage something, but really, what was the outcome of that management? Did your team, streamline a process? Did they win awards? Did they, what? Give me something,
Absolutely.
And that's what's going to get the interview. And that's where they can talk about, well, I see the requirement is this. I've noted this, but I have all this experience, and that's where they can shine, I think. So it really goes hand in hand, having all of these pieces, the LinkedIn, the resume with the right information, like you said, keyword optimization. Don't just create a resume with a task list, but what was the outcome of what you did? What was, what's your I always call it your professional career story. How are you going to tell your story so that you're memorable? So perfect. I like how you said that. And brought it back around, that it has to have something that's going to catch the reviewer's attention, and it's got to be impactful. What did you do? Yeah.
And just to add to that, I educate my clients on the two methods, CAR and STAR, that are predominantly STAR, situation, task, action, result, or CAR, challenge, action, result. Mm-hmm. From the beginning, because I also do provide, interview prep as well. So I set the stage in the beginning of the process and say, think in that term and through that lens, if you will, using that methodology as we're constructing our key achievements, because then those questions, and there's a lot of them, hundreds of them at least,
right,
that follow, when interviewers are using that method. So it's important then to have the key achievements kind of written in that format. So then you're not like, I can't, it's right there. So it's shaping the interview, as I say to my clients.
Yes. No, that's great. That's great. And then let's see, next question. So I get this a lot. Well, what does the perfect candidate look like, Dr. Bennett? Well, what would you say the perfect candidate looks like?
I say no one's perfect, for one. Right. But I would also say that somebody could look great on paper. Somebody that, is fortunate to meet somebody like ourselves and help them, get in front of the individuals. It's kind of like I always say it kind of, an interview, is like a first date. So and it's first dates over and over again. So somebody can look good on paper, but then when they're presenting themselves in front of, one of the decision makers, they flounder. So I think that's where it comes into personality. The soft skills come in, reading a room. Now with technology and the last year and the impact that the pandemic had, a lot of interviews, and it's still going on, have been virtual and like this, from a video perspective, conferencing platforms. So you have to engage the audience in a different way, and try to read the person that you're talking to. Sometimes the person doesn't have their camera on. You have the camera on, they don't have the camera on. Okay, so how are you reading their body language? So I think going back, the softer skills come in, which is an important part of the job. No matter if it's technical or people management, client facing or behind the scenes, you're going to need to know how to work with the team. You're going to need to know how to deal with challenges that you're going to face, and how do you do that effectively.
Right. Well, I think it goes to, like you said, part of your expertise is helping them highlight their value, creating that career narrative to grab the reviewer's attention. I always say, to be the perfect candidate, you have to meet all the requirements and you have to meet a lot of the preferred, but the goal is, once you get that interview, show them that you're the perfect candidate, because there's a lot of times when, and I've heard this from a lot of my HR folks and hiring authorities in general, the CEOs and owners of companies who say, I think my perfect candidate looks like this, but then I've had these interviews and I have, two different people, and one has all this stuff and the other one has, similar, but I see so much potential, the personality, all of a sudden that person now becomes my perfect candidate. I want that girl or that guy, So I think going back to, your expertise and helping with that career narrative, putting that story on paper, helping them demonstrate the value helps them become the perfect candidate for that interviewer,
Yep.
And then, like you said, once you're in that interview, shining, clicking, because the best interviews, I always say, are conversations. If you can have a really good conversation, you're answering their questions, you're giving examples of the work you've done, you're reading the room with the body language, all of that comes through. Even us right now, just doing this virtual podcast, I can tell when you're on a roll with something. I'm watching you. I can see it. And I know you're going to say something else. It's the same in an interview. We recognize that. So job seekers, you can become the perfect candidate by making sure your resume, meets the requirements they're seeking. You're demonstrating that not just by a task, but you're giving them outcomes, results. That's how you help them become, see you as the perfect candidate. And then you get the interview, and that's when you really get to shine. All right. You touched on one other thing, and I want to bring that up. So what is more important to list on a resume? Hard skills, soft skills, both?
Well, I would say if we're going to list priority, hard skills, most definitely. And that is sometimes a little easier to articulate in your, within your position summaries. And I'm speaking of the resume here, because you have to bring it forward to your LinkedIn. I keep coupling the two together.
Right.
But with the resume, the required document that you have to provide when applying. So you have to articulate the relevant hard skills of the job, both within each of the positions as well as the key achievements. So just to paint a picture here, so you look at a resume, and the way I kind of format, or I should say structure my resumes for my clients, is we start with, I call it the thesis of the resume, the argument. Hey, I'm the perfect candidate, and this is why. But I always say to my clients, okay, that summary paragraph or the main bullets to set the stage, you can't just articulate that you have this experience. You actually have to prove it. So that's where the within each position, key achievements predominantly will articulate and prove that, give you legitimacy. So that's, hard skills. Soft skills are, I'm not a believer in just incorporating keywords, like keyword stuffing within a resume. I don't find that very effective. It's very obvious to a hiring manager or recruiter. But if you have to, if it's a huge part of the job, if there's a good amount of soft skills, then I'm very deliberate on what to include. But I go back to the key achievements have to substantiate them. You can't just say that you're an outstanding communicator. Well, where have you been an outstanding communicator?
Right.
What have you applied that outstanding communication towards? If it's been, within your role that you work with C-suite, let's say, as an example, and you had to present to the C-suite. Okay, well, give me that scenario, and what part of your communication skills did you apply to then, communicate to that type of audience, as just an example. If that's a huge part of the job, and I've worked with individuals at that level that have to present and have to work with that audience, and it's a whole different ball game than how you talk to your peers or how you're talking to a customer. So
right. I use similar language. I always say, anything you put on your resume, where's your supporting evidence? And I think that's the maybe the geek in me with the PhD, whatever, all, hammering it home on me, where's your supporting evidence? So I kind of carry that through, like, okay, I like that bullet. Where's your supporting evidence? Where, you claim this. Now I need, fact, how, so good point. I have one other question, and this one has started coming up this year. You had actually sent me some stuff, and I'm like, yes. So anyway, how important is finding a culture match when looking at potential companies? What do companies look for in a candidate with regards to a culture match?
Well, I would certainly say yes. 100%. I think cultural fit has come up, especially in the last year. Companies have had to really made some drastic pivots on how they do business, and for job seekers, how they're hiring. The hiring process had to shift. In-person interviews weren't possible. So, then how are companies then vetting candidates? Of course, everything is done electronically, but ultimately, once you have, your pool of candidates, then how are you vetting them? How are you identifying them? So then it's how is then the company, because when you go to let me give you a scenario pre-pandemic, when you walk into an office environment, you as the candidate, you're getting a feel for immediately for the culture. What size is the office? Is it a satellite office? Are you going into headquarters? That's a totally different feel. So that gives you an immediate sense of culture. Meeting the person in, face to face within a room, then maybe being brought around and meeting other teammates that you'd be working with. That again gives you a sense of culture. I would say, how the company going aside, since you didn't job seekers, you didn't have that luxury this past year. So networking, talking to people that work for that company, go back to networking, as well as doing your research online, seeing what is out there about the company and how they portray themselves, and then matching that up with people that okay, is this kind of who they are, or are they basically, they're branding themselves this way, but is this still kind of what's behind the scenes, as much as you can get from contacts or people that you trust. So I think, at the end of the day, yes, culture fit is really important. And I think on both ends, I can think of a time, in my work history where, I worked for an organization that, was extremely employee focused. But at the same time, it still had its challenges just based on the work. So, you had, the sense that you were feeling valued, but then how the company was structured, it was very siloed, if you will. So you had to feel comfortable working within, that specific office, even though the company as a whole was very employee focused. You had to be able to work well, with your teammates. That's who you see every day. Right. So it's definitely a really important part.
Right. I'm glad that you brought that up, because I do the career leader assessment. We talked about that a little bit before we jumped on the podcast, and they cover 4 different things when it comes to culture fit. After you take this career assessment that looks at motivators and interests and skills, it kind of produces this report that also gives you a culture fit match. And it talks about companies that are collaborative and considerate, extroversion and decisiveness, innovative and change, and then precision and planning. And so when you look at those companies, you had touched on it. Are they, do they take you around after the interview? Do you meet face to face? Those are telling signs of what kind of company that is. Mm-hmm. And then, like you said, doing your research, job seekers, go on their website. Their website will tell you a lot. Mm-hmm. If their website has bright, more neonish colors, those bright greens and, metallic-y looking blues, I don't know. You're gonna notice that it's a more innovative company. They're purposely grabbing your attention. Mm-hmm. They're looking for people who are, creative thinkers, and innovative and change. A lot of times in those companies, I kind of chuckle because I used to be a change management expert in a former life. And I would laugh because I don't like a lot of change, but that's why you have plan B and plan C. Mm-hmm. So I love those precision and planning kind of companies. I'm very strategic. I'm a strategic thinker, very strategy minded, and I want to get from point A to point B, very big picture, but yet let's drill down. And when you look at the innovative, I'm the type where best practice, if this is how it's been done, we can change it up. But if it's working, we're getting the numbers we want, why change it? Mm-hmm. An innovative company says, yeah, we're getting the numbers and it's great, but let's change it anyway. Right. Are you going to be a good fit for that kind of company? Can you do that? Right. I would not, although I like innovation, and I'm not a laggard. I'm not going to be last to the game, but I'm also not the first person to go out and buy that new product. I'm going to wait. I'm going to observe, and I'm going to make sure that it's working, causes no harm, all those things. I'm not your person that's going to thrive in a company that's very innovative and throws good stuff out the window. I'm going to go get that stuff. I'm like, wait a minute, we don't waste anything, So it really, that culture fit matters. You know, where
Mhm.
are you going to feel most comfortable?
Right.
And
Right.
so that's good that you brought that up. I
Yeah.
appreciate that. Yeah.
I think you, and just to piggyback off of that, talking to a colleague of mine in regards to this very subject, and she talked about, when there's a merger, when, an acquisition of some, and companies go through this, and you have new employees that maybe went through that, and recognizing, okay, they the right, they were the right fit prior to that merger, but then it happened soon thereafter, and then it's really figuring out, are they going to stick with this company now with this change? How agile are they? How flexible are they? And that's very telling too. So, there's some things that unfortunately are out of your control when you have a company that you think is one thing, and then it shifts, let's say 6 months in, you're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I don't know if this is the right cultural fit. So it depends on your personality and what basically your tolerance level.
And that comes in, I will say, that's where the coaching is valuable. We're both coaches. It's valuable if you're not sure what kind of company you would like to work for, or you're a very diverse person. Again, I'll go back to my military clients who they can do it all. They're jacks of all trade. I mean, there's nothing, they just come from a culture that says, figure it out, and they do, so coming out of the military culture where you have that mindset and you're starting to figure out, well, what kind of company do I want to work for? That's where the career coaching does help a lot, because we can talk through those things. And then, like you said, just pointing in the right direction for the research aspect. Yes, look at the websites, but there's so much more to company research, to making sure it's a good fit. And then I'll kind of end with this thought. When you're in that interview, sometimes my clients will say they're nervous about the interview. They haven't done it in so many years or whatever. And I take a little bit of the nervousness away when I say, well, remember, you're interviewing them too.
Yep.
It's
Absolutely.
not just a one-way street. It's two-way. You can determine in that interview, they may love you, but you may decide, I don't want to work here. I don't like something about what happened, and maybe it goes back to what you were saying about that culture fit, just how the company handled the interview. Did they walk them around? Did they, just how were they, So you're interviewing job seekers, you're interviewing the companies too. So, yeah. All right, Jessica. Well, those are the questions I had for you today. Is there anything else you'd like to leave with our job seekers?
I would say stay positive. You need to make sure that you know who you are and what your value is and what you want. And it's companies were hiring last year. They're still hiring this year. Don't feel discouraged. I would say, that attitude is a big factor, and also partnering with the right expert if you need to. So certainly, my information there, and check me out, or somebody like Neen as well. Whatever's basically the right fit for you, but there's a lot of us out here that just wants to help and make a difference for your career.
Right. You can also find Jessica on LinkedIn, so make sure you look her up there. I have your information, like you said, there, and I think that's it. Thank you so much again for being on the show. You're welcome to stay backstage if you want, as I bring Brenda on. Now, friends, Brenda, we had a scheduling conflict, but she is such a trooper. She and I recorded her interview, so she's gone ahead and answered the questions that I had for her, so you're not going to miss anything. So Jessica, with that, I'm going to take you off screen, and I'm going to work the technical magic here and bring up that interview.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Thanks again for coming on. All right, folks, bear with me. Let me get that screen up so I can bring that interview with Brenda up. All right, here we go. Let's see. All right, and I'm going to go back here a minute. All right, I'm going to take myself off screen, but before I do that, I want to give you a little background information about Brenda. So Brenda is the HR expert today. She is, let me get this right, Brenda Neckvatel. She's an international award-winning HR professional and is often referred to by her clients as an HR force of nature. And I'll tell you, that woman is amazing. I am in a group with her. We support the military. I'll talk a little bit more about that. But she is just amazing. She owns a company called Best Practices. Prior to launching her own HR business, she worked for various Fortune 500 companies. In addition to her entrepreneurial endeavors, Brenda also donates 32 weeks out of the year to help Navy SEALs and other special operators transition from the military to that civilian sector. She helps our military all the time. She's very passionate about it, and it comes through in all that she does. And that's actually how we got connected. We volunteer for the Honor Foundation as executive coaches, helping those military transition. She is that HR expert. She has been featured in Forbes and other publications. And she even has her own podcast, and I'm drawing a blank on the podcast. But if you go to her website, which I'll share at the end of the show, you can see all of that great information, and you can reach out to Brenda. So I will stop talking and get to that interview so you guys can check it out. So here we go. Go ahead. All right, well, I'm trying to get to that interview, but for some reason it is not letting me get to it. Bear with me, folks. Where is my podcast partner, Melanie? She's so good at this stuff. All right, here we go. I think I got it now. Or not. Why is this not playing? Oh, that's not good. There we go. Hi, Brenda. Thanks for coming on the show today. As our HR expert, I have 4 questions for you that my clients tend to ask me with regards to resume writing and systems and HR and all that wonderful stuff. And since you're the HR expert, I figure who better to ask than you. So the first question is, how do HR professionals come up with those job posting listings, descriptions, whatever you want to call them? How do they do that?
All right, there's a couple of things that they can do. First off, if they have a job description, don't copy and paste the job description, but take the major points of the job and actually create a nice post. And one of the things that you can do is you can go surf other job postings to see how other major companies do it. And what you'll find is that you'll start to see like a cadence and a flow. And so if you have multiple recruiters that are using the same kind of language, it actually is a really great way to help brand your company, as it sounds like the same person who's writing the job ad time and time again.
Right. So for the job seeker, they wouldn't copy the description verbatim within their resume, but they should ping on keywords in the job description, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the best things that you can do is actually identify it's hard. A lot of people are trying to beat the keyword function in an applicant tracking system. Don't do that, right? If they're telling you that they're looking for XYZ competency, then make sure it's somewhere in your resume and preferably up close towards the top. Then that way the system can pick it up. If the job ad is actually being placed through an applicant tracking system, if the job posting is not being tracked, then the ATS won't pick up on it as much. But a recruiter who's not using an ATS would.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Perfect. The next question I get a lot from my job seekers has to do with the job posting and the required and preferred. What is your advice on when something's required and when something's preferred?
So required means that the organization has deemed that in order for a person really to meet the eligibility or the requirements of the job, they have to have a requirement. So if let's say, for example, you're, recruiting for an engineer position, right? And they are adamant that you have an app in education, because when it comes to engineering, if you do something wrong, people are going to get hurt more often than not, unless it's like data engineering. Then your company will wind up getting hurt if the data is wrong, right? So yeah, so that's something that you want to make sure that you have the appropriate education for the job that's up. Now, if somebody says preferred, then look to the side and see if they are looking for, what kind of experience that you might have, for instance, right? So preferred is, they prefer it, but it's not necessary. It's not absolutely required, right? Education is just one of those examples. That's probably going to be the most common one that you would wind up finding. Other companies also, when it comes to preferred, if you don't necessarily have a credential, so let's say, for example, you're going for an IT data tech kind of position, and if you don't have a type of class or certification in a type of data code writing, but you have experience on it, they're more than likely willing to help you get that education and help you skill up. So preferred means that there's an opportunity also to learn more on the job, but it's not a critical component. It's something that they can work with you on.
Awesome, thank you. And then the next question, what do organizations value more when evaluating a job candidate? Is it their experience? You've touched on education, or is it potential, or all of the above?
Actually, I don't think it's any of those. I think I'm going to throw you for a zinger here, dear. I think, honestly, what it is that if a person, if they have the experience, they can speak to the essential function of the role. And if they are able to speak to the essential functions of the role from something that they've done in the past, or they're able to demonstrate that they are trainable or can think through the situation, that's key, because that shows that it's an action taker. It's a person who can bring something to a conclusion, be it a problem, a challenge, a project, right? And if they see that you are an action-oriented individual and that you're capable of closing down those challenges, closing projects, bringing success to an end result, then they're probably going to be more apt to bringing you in, because just because somebody has the education doesn't mean that they're capable of doing the job.
Right, which is why I tell my job seekers to always show results and outcomes on their resumes. It's so important. Otherwise, you're just creating a task list and nobody cares about the tasks. They want to know what was the result of what you were doing. So, perfect.
Here's something else too with the experience. I just want to throw this out here. Just because you have experience doing something doesn't mean that you also have the experience that matches that company.
Right.
So you could be could usher in a project, but that doesn't always necessarily mean that the project that you ushered in will be a cookie cutter fit for the organization that you're interviewing with. But what you do have to demonstrate, again, is that action piece. So I thought I'd throw that out there.
Right. No, that's good advice. Good advice. All right, and then the final question, I always get this question, has to do with the applicant tracking system. So not only do they have to try to get through a system, which I always, I'm big on networking, then you don't have to worry about a system. At least not so much, right?
Right.
But, sometimes they don't realize that you might even have to go through two. It just depends on the organization. Especially with mergers and acquisitions, a lot of times these companies are bringing them in, and so anyway, let me defer to you on this. What is an applicant tracking system, and why do companies use them?
So an applicant tracking system is a portal to which they create and post job positions with their organization. Now, what I can tell you is that they're very expensive, and a company just standing on its own 2 feet won't have more than one. They're going to have just one because they are expensive, and some of them are actually very complex. And so, depending upon which organization you want and its functionality. But what they are capable of doing is also connecting to other job applicant tracking systems. Like, for instance, Indeed is an applicant tracking system. Monster.com is now an applicant tracking system, where before it was just a job board.
Well, and even Google came out with one now.
Exactly, right? So they can
Right.
so your subscriber, your purchased applicant tracking system can now connect to those other ATS systems that are online and web-based and are also services. And more than likely, they could have like a subscription package involved in it and all sorts of other stuff. I mean, it gets pretty wild. But if you have an organization that has taken on a merger and the two companies are working together, then yes, it is very likely that they have two separate ATS systems that they at some point in time are going to have to figure out, how do we merge all of the data into one, and which one are we going to choose? So, you know, if you have a company that's 150 employees, they're not going to run out and get two ATSs because they're going to combat each other. And not to mention, they also have like orientation and onboarding capabilities as well. So it doesn't make sense to have to transfer data back and forth between two systems, because they're both going to be reaching out to the exact same job market. So no, I wouldn't. Most companies aren't going to have to. They're just going to be sticking with one.
Okay, good to know. Good to know. And an applicant tracking system is just a way for companies to gather that information, because if they hire you, correct me if I'm wrong, you're the expert, it kind of starts the file, really, doesn't it?
It depends. It depends on the system, and it's how it's used. You know, as soon as anybody who submits an application online using an ATS, yes, technically that's when the file starts, but that's only on the interviewing side of it, right? Not every company will use a job application. And the companies that do use a job application, you want to make sure that you're filling those out in detail. Please do not put under the job, where it comes to the job history, see resume. Right. I'm telling you, if it's me looking at your application, you do that, I'm checking you, because I just asked you to do something specific and put your best foot forward, of which you just demonstrated to me that you are willing to take a shortcut, and that's not what I asked you to do. Right. So, right, I asked you, I want to know what your job, not to mention, a resume is not a legal binding document. It's an advertisement of who you are. Your resume, or excuse me, your job application is actually that, of which you have to sign an attestation of below at the bottom or at the end of it that says, to the best of my knowledge, this information is thorough and complete. There are a lot of people that falsify the resumes. There's no doubt about it. The resume is already inflated just by people who don't lie, right? Because we're out there advertising. We're out there promoting ourselves, right? So if you put a resume out that's not entirely honest, and you fill out a job application that matches the resume, and you're not honest, well, guess what? Your employer, if they find out that you have now said that you are something that you're not, has grounds to terminate you.
Yes, and I've actually seen that in action. Of course, you know, this was a very long time ago. Gosh, I'm going to date myself when I say this, but 25 years ago, I worked with a woman who did exactly that. And they found out she didn't have that bachelor degree she said she had, and they escorted her out, and she was making really good money for them, but it didn't matter. Yep, and our integrity is important.
It's everything. And in our world too, that, you know, years ago, I think it was like, I want to say it was back in 2003 or 1998, one of those 2 years, because I remember reading this more than once. There was a sheriff up in Pennsylvania who years ago, when he got his position, the deputy sheriff, and then it was eventually elected into sheriff, said that he was a U.S. Navy SEAL. We work with U.S. Navy SEALs quite frequently. And so they wound up going through the entire department and doing a complete background check on everybody. And that happens. Employers do that. Yes. They do a periodic background sweep to make sure that there's no criminal problems or people didn't get the driver's license suspended or any, you know, funny things like that. And they actually discovered this guy wasn't, in fact, a Navy SEAL, so they terminated him. But here's the complication that takes place with somebody that's in a sheriff's position. Every arrest now can be legally contested.
Oh, gosh. Yeah.
So there's a consequence to lying. And in a situation like that, that's massive.
Yes, that's a great example. But again, at the end of the day, folks, it's about character and integrity. Why would you do that to yourself? You worked hard, demonstrate your abilities on your resume, tell your career story, and do the right things, you'll get the job. You know, you just have to do the right things. Don't take the shortcuts. Don't falsify information.
Yep.
All
Exactly.
right, Brenda. Well, that's all I had in the way of questions. As an HR expert, is there anything else you would share with job seekers to help them as they navigate their new job search?
Absolutely. You know, with everything that's going on as we're recovering, coming out of COVID, and we're starting to kind of get back in. Once we're fully back into the swing of the world again, this job market isn't going to instantly switch. It's still going to be as crazy. And in some industries, it's a employees market. In some industries, and it's an employers market. Regardless on whether side you are on in the job arena, you have to really incorporate networking into your job search, because there's so many crazy changes that have been taking place. ATS systems are overridden. People are over, you know, I mean, it's nuts. Honestly, networking, whether you're a job seeker or you're a hiring manager or a recruiter, you have to now incorporate networking as part of your search. If you're not doing it, you are going to be doing it longer.
Yes, I need to have you on the show more often. That is one of the things that I just beat the drum on all the time. I need to have you talk to my clients, because I'm like, look, you can apply online all you want, but at the end of the day, more times than not, you're going to get the job through networking. I don't, you know, it's still the old adage, who you know is still very true.
Yep, absolutely.
And so I really do try to get my clients to go the networking route. I do share a lot of, you know, ways to network if you don't like to network. It's really just about having a conversation, and then just using, you know, the platforms that are out there. LinkedIn is a great, you know, platform for networking, and I do share a lot of different tips on how they can do that. But great advice, Brenda. I appreciate you coming on the show again. We'll I know everybody's going to like what you have shared, so I'm sure I'll be asking you on again.
I'd love to.
I appreciate you, and I will talk to you on another day.
Sounds great. I look forward to it.
All right, Brenda. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
All right, friends. So now you got information from two experts, and it sounds like they agree that your resume has to contain information that demonstrates the results you have achieved. They need to show outcomes, because you're not going to get the interview if the resume is just a task list with a bunch of items and no outcomes. So make sure, job seekers, that you're putting that information on there that is that supporting evidence to say, yes, I did this task, but here's the outcome, here's that result, so that you can stand out from your competition and get that interview, so you can shine in that interview. We also heard from both experts that LinkedIn is important and networking is huge, because applicant tracking systems are out there, and the best way to avoid them is to network and get the job through who you know. So with that, I hope you've gotten all the information you were hoping to get today. If you have any questions, please put them in the comment box. I'll definitely look at that and answer your questions. If you have a podcast topic that you want us to discuss on this show, let me know that as well. We'll put something together and hopefully bring that topic to you. You can certainly reach out to us at Vision to Purpose. Just go to visiontopurpose.com, and certainly happy to help you. Now, I'm so excited. So next month, we have dedicated the whole month to military authors. So what do I mean by that? So those veterans who have gone on to write books. So I have a former Army Ranger coming on next week, the 6th, May 6th. He's written a book called Call of the Warrior, A Veteran's Guide to Life and Joining the Military. So you're not going to want to miss that. Also on that show, I have Dr. Michael Brown. He is a retired Air Force officer. He has also written actually several books, many academic books, but also his most recent book called 3D Coaching Suggestions for a New Approach. So really excited about that. Also within the month, we have Diana Goodsky coming on. She wrote a book called Warrior Spirit Rising. Awesome book. And she's a retired Navy, I believe she's a Master Chief, but I'll let her tell you her story then. And then we have Dave Chesson, who is a former Navy nuclear engineer who was on submarines, and then he became a military diplomat somewhere along the line. And he is the owner of Kindlepreneur. He's also written books, but he's really known in the industry as the person that helps authors. So thought it would be great to have him on the show. So anyway, make sure that you're tapping in, especially if you're wanting to be an author, you are an author looking for ideas to further your author career. Please come on the show. Come watch the show starting next Thursday, same time, 11 a.m. Eastern time. And with that, I will say goodbye and have a wonderful rest of your day.